Hey there, and welcome to today's webinar titled Avoid the Industry 4.0 Tech Trap, How to Assemble a Future-Proof Mobile Solution for Your Manufacturing Environment. Today's event is sponsored by Explore Technologies, Barcoding Inc., and Intel. I am Mike Hockett. I'm the editor of Industrial Distribution Magazine and Industrial Maintenance and Plant Operation Magazine, or IMPO for short. ID and IMPO are two of Advantage Business Media's manufacturing brands, along with the others that you see the icons on this intro slide. And I'll be moderating today's discussion. We're hearing it all the time now. Businesses have to get mobile. And in manufacturing, mobile technology has opened up a whole new world of potential when it comes to connectivity, real-time information, visibility, and transparency for all kinds of operations. Whether it's regarding sales or warehouse operations at a distributor, production operations of a manufacturer on the plant floor, or maintenance operations at anything in between, there are many ways mobile technology is heavily impacting manufacturing. The challenge for these manufacturers is finding the right mobile technology solution to boost their operations. Investing in mobile devices without doing the proper homework can easily result in wasted time, effort, and dollars just for the sake of being able to say you become mobile. With the growth of the Internet of Things, cloud usage, RFID tracking, automation, and other manufacturing technologies, everyone seems to agree that mobile technology will only become a bigger part of the future. And with that, it's crucial to have a mobile solution that will evolve and grow with those other technologies these devices are connected to. Today's webinar will cover these issues and other subtopics as a means to educate our audience on the resources needed to assemble a mobility solution that is compatible with back office IT architecture, machines, and equipment on the shop floor, as well as your budget. And to dive into these areas, we've recruited a couple of industry experts to share their expertise and knowledge. Chase Soden, a supply chain architect at Barcoding Inc., is a Six Sigma Black Belt with more than 20 years of experience. At Barcoding, Soden helps create and deliver holistic end-to-end solutions to make client supply chains more efficient, accurate, and connected. Previously, Soden served as the Chief Technology Officer for Savant Software, Inc., where he oversaw all aspects of strategic IT planning, implementation, internal infrastructure, and other global IT initiatives. Along with his Six Sigma Black Belt, Soden possesses a PMP certification and is an Agile Scrum Master. John Graff serves as the Vice President of Marketing at Explore Technologies. He is responsible for the ideation and oversight of strategic integrated communications and product marketing initiatives that drive increased brand awareness and widespread adoption of Explore rugged tablets across the company's addressable markets. Graff brings to Explore more than 25 years of B2B marketing experience and a strong track record of innovation, change, and evolution within the technology industry. So thank you to John and Chase for being here today. For any audience member viewing the slide presentation, you can send us your questions on this topic via the chat box, which we strongly encourage, and we'll use those questions during a Q&A session following our panelist presentation. Also, this webinar will be made available on demand starting tomorrow, so starting then, you'll be able to watch it anytime and share it with anyone. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to our first presenter, John Graff.
Thank you, Mike. This is John from Explore, and for those of you that are not familiar, Explore has been around for over 20 years, focused exclusively on rugged tablet solutions in a wide range of industries and applications, including manufacturing, distribution, field service, public safety, and more. Now, as Mike mentioned, we have both companies today have a tremendous amount of experience with mobile technology solutions that have directly been involved in solving real issues in the manufacturing environment, including managing materials, connecting with industrial machinery, compliance reporting, tracking inventory, monitoring the production line, and really many other workflows in your manufacturing distribution environment. So both companies have been around a long time with a focus on solving your needs, and we look forward to sharing some of our insights with you today. So as we know, today's manufacturing environments are facing nearly constant change. Often that can be incremental or small change, but in some cases we're seeing manufacturers take on some very large steps as they push from yesterday's automation systems to the new digital Industry 4.0 environment. As you look at mobile devices that are going to be part of your manufacturing environment, you need ones that can be adaptable and often the flexibility for needs you will have in the future that you might not see today. So often you're looking for your best choice is something that's handling not only the tasks you need today, but can also have that flexibility and scalability for the future. Chase, your thoughts on how the change is affecting manufacturing today?
Yeah, so the real thing here around manufacturing and change is too many times people look at their root cause of a problem or just forget to ask the reason why. Why are we trying to make a change? What's the driving force behind that? And a lot of times people will just simply throw technology at a problem. And there's a quote by Bill Gates that I really like, is that if you throw technology and an ineffective process, all you're going to do is amplify the ineffectiveness. But if you throw technology at an effective process, then you're going to amplify its effect. So what I really ask people to do from a continuous improvement perspective is always ask the reason, why are you looking to make the change? And make sure you understand the root cause of the problem of what you're trying to fix or what you're trying to address. And as John stated, it's also extremely important when looking at technology, don't look at your environment today, but look at where you're going to be 6 months or even 6 years from now. Because one of the things that's really important when you're looking at technology is you don't want to implement technology that's going to be thrown away. I'm a firm believer in crawl, walk, run. So figure out where you're going to be in the future, figure out where you're going to go, and make sure you're implementing the right change for the right reason with the right technology.
And that's a good point, Chase. And so for those of you listening, as you're approaching your future mobility projects, there's some questions that you definitely need to think about, including if you have a current mobility solution, how is it performing when you need it, how you need it, and how is it adapting to these ever-changing processing and communications? Can your current mobile platform and the solutions provider accommodate your unique interoperability demands that incorporate the equipment from the past, present, and future? And can your current mobile PC platform run all the software you need to, including apps built in-house, as well as enterprise systems you're getting from third party? And then a last thing that we will touch on more, but is, are you supporting all your highly skilled information workers? And we'll talk about how that is really broadening in scope from what people thought of in the past. So as we move forward and start thinking about finding the right mobile technology tools, I think it's important that you understand, manufacturing has seen some significant shifts and change over the last few decades. And in much of the last period, which people refer to as Industry 3.0, we saw a lot of focus on vertical integration. You had a lot of automation companies that would come and offer the complete solution for your manufacturing automation needs. But now as we approach this digitalization and the connectivity and communications with Industry 4.0, we're seeing that vertical all-in-one approach can no longer meet the needs and the flexibility of customers. So often it's important that we look for a best-in-breed solution. Today we're seeing this convergence of operational technology, or OT, and IT. And just like how the front office systems evolved to being best of breed, from computing to networking to servers and connectivity, the same approach is impacting manufacturing. So as you think about it going forward, make sure you're weighing your options. Realize that a bundled single vendor solution may sound nice, but generally you're going to have less versatility compared with something unbundled that's custom built for you that is comprised of best-in-class components. And we'll talk about this in much more detail, but it's really important that you consider the costs. As Chase mentioned earlier, there's lots of examples of people just throwing money at technology for technology's sake, and all they end up doing is amplifying existing problems. And then a key thing that I think, and Chase can provide some good insight on this, but make sure you find a solutions provider that is really trustworthy. Too often, people think about engaging partners late in the process, and they think of them more as a vendor, when if you find the right partner and you involve them from the very first step, you can get a tremendous amount of insight, experience that will help you deliver the right mobile solution for your needs. Chase, your thoughts?
Well, so, I think John said a lot of really good stuff here. And when you're looking for a solution provider, what's really important is, are they order takers or are they solution providers? A very simple case in point with a client that I worked with recently, they contacted us for a print and apply at the end of their manufacturing process. And we could have quoted the hardware, no problem, but I asked the question, why? What's the business case? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to obtain? What are you trying to bring to the table? And so it's very important that when you are looking for a solution provider, that the key part of that is the word solution. And also, like John was stating, is if you go with a bundled solution, then a lot of times they are strong in certain aspects, but they're weak in others. So they're not necessarily a best in class. The easiest analogy I can use for you is you need to buy a new car. And you've got a list of features and functions that are important to you, like blind side, lane changing, so forth and so on. If you take your list and go on to the Chevrolet dealership, pretty sure they're going to try to fit you into a Chevrolet, whereas maybe a Ford was a better fit for you. So when you're looking at a solution provider, you want them to make sure they understand your business, understand your requirements, and they can bring a solution to the table that maybe it is not a bundle solution. It's a best-in-breed, best-in-class solution for you. And again, I go back to what I said previously. It's making sure you understand what you're trying to do from a business perspective that will make sure you get the right fit in technology. And you want that partner you look for to become what I call your trusted advisor. Who is someone who's going to be honest with you and give you the opinion, we may not be the right fit for this opportunity for you, but let me tell you who is. Someone who's got your best interest in case, not looking after their commissions.
Great point, Chase. And as you touched on earlier, this slide captures a very simple but critical aspect is as you approach planning for a mobility project, absolutely must ensure that mobility is meant to eliminate downtime and not create it. So as you mentioned earlier, if you have an ineffective process and just throw technology or mobile solution, you might just end up amplifying your downtime.
I agree, John. And the other part of it is not just the mobility to eliminate downtime, but it's the entire process itself. Being from a lean manufacturing background, lean is all about removing wasted steps in the process. And so when you're doing the wasted steps, you're trying to streamline the process, and you're trying to make sure that you don't make eliminations in it, but it's going to cause downtime, to John's point. So it's really important to make sure that you work with the people in the process to understand what you're trying to do and the change, so that way when you do implement the right technology mobile solution, that it's going to make sure that your uptime is higher than it is today. You're increasing productivity, you're increasing efficiencies.
So today we are going to walk through some steps that are focused on helping you develop a best-in-class mobility solution for your company and your needs. Now we'll walk through each of these, but one thing I'll point out right from the beginning is if you look at those first two, they're really focused on you. What are your needs, your company's needs? What are your company's processes? And what is it that you are trying to address or improve? And so finding the right set of solutions starts with making sure you know the problem you're trying to solve.
So we've been kind of carrying the same thread through a lot of the slides. And it's really important to make sure that when you're applying the technology, it meets the business case. And when it meets the business case, you want to make sure that you've got the right people and the right processes in place. The one thing I have seen happen before is people will implement technology and then change the process to fit the technology. Well, that's not the right way to go. The way to go is to make sure that the solution provider understands your processes and they're implementing technology that supports the behavior you want on the floor. You do not want to have the process changed to meet the technology. So again, it's really important that you leverage the knowledge of the people within the process, you understand and eliminate the waste, and then as you're implementing best-in-class mobility solutions, it's a win-win for your organization.
And one other thing I'll add is, at the end, obviously you have to think about the cost. You're going to have budget requirements or constraints, and what's important is that you consider the real cost over a number of years. Now, often manufacturers understand this. The depreciation of machinery happens over the life of the machine. And likewise, that same thought process needs to be looking at the total cost for your mobility solution and not just, what the price is to acquire or purchase the components in the system. And this is something we will talk about a little bit more. Now, before we jump in and kind of go into these steps a little bit more, another thing that you can lean on and refer to is there are a lot of customers out there that have had tremendous success applying mobility to make their manufacturing environments more efficient, more productive, reduce costs, or increase quality. Just touching on a few, in the automotive industry, we know cars today are increasingly complex as you bring together thousands of components and subsystems, many obviously coming from different suppliers, different vendors. And we have one leading auto manufacturer that walked us through their plant and showed how building one car, there were 246 pieces of paper that were part of that car going through the manufacturing process. And they told us stories where even they have 2 printers on each line just in case one goes down. But they've had cases where the paper is jammed and a whole production line is stopped just because of that paper. And that was the initiative to say, we want to apply mobility. We want to empower the workers, the forklifts, the work carts with real-time information, push changes as they happen, and actually use some location intelligence to follow the workers and the machinery as that car went down the production line. Another good example is in the aircraft industry. They've long realized that their factory workers are really information workers. And during the fabrication of a plane, obviously everything has to be done exactly right, documented, and then inspected. And often these detailed instructions were located in huge binders and blueprints that often were in a rolling cabinet right there. So the workers were often going into the fuselage, doing some work, and would have to come out to reference the instructions and the blueprints, and this going back and forth, which was very time-consuming and inefficient. So we've seen a lot of the leading aircraft manufacturers bring mobility and rugged tablets in where they can display the work instructions, the subassembly blueprints, and show the precise instructions, again, based on the location of the worker or the tool. And this has also led to really improving the time, the manufacturing time, as well as the inspection and follow-up. One other thing I'll mention as I touched on blueprints and work instructions, a simple tip for a lot of you to think about is, sometimes mobility, people think, oh, I want, a handheld device, like a rugged phone. But yet, if you're going to display a blueprint, we've seen some customers that realize, you know what, this device is too small for my worker to actually see the information he needs to. So think about the content you're going to want to display and share through your mobility, and make sure, your solution can adequately display it so your workers can see it. So let's start walking through these steps, and first is obviously identifying the driving force for change. Chase, why don't you go ahead and talk about your input on this?
Sure, no problem. So, the first thing is that too many people just make a change to make a change. We've got to make a change to stay competitive and things of that nature. And that's not the reason why you make a change. You're looking to make a change because you're trying to enhance your business or address a business concern. I'm always a firm believer that you should be proactive and not reactive. You should try to identify areas where change can be made before it becomes a problem. Because when it actually becomes a problem, now you're reactionary, you're jumping through fires, you're trying to hurry up and solve the problem, when you may be addressing the symptom and not the root cause of the problem. So I always tell people, ask the reason, why are you making the change? Understanding the why and the driving force behind it is really important. And then again, like I stated earlier, when you're looking at implementing technology, make sure you're using the foresight to look into the future and explain with your solution provider, this is where we're at today. What are the trends that you see? These are the trends that we see. This is what we think is going to happen. This is what we're going to do. We're going to change our manufacturing. We're going to be bringing on additional products or SKUs that we're looking at making. Because you want to, again, you want that technology that can evolve as you do business or change. Kind of like what John was saying on the previous slide, it's really interesting. There's something on a tablet or any kind of mobility device. It's what is called a form factor. And the form factor becomes very important because when you're looking to run an application on a mobile device, the one thing from an efficiency perspective is you don't want a lot of scrolling left and right and up and down. So that increases your efficiencies. The other thing to also take a look at is, do I need to look at other applications in my job? So some people go with a small RF device which has a screen about the size of your mobile phone, but they need to actually look something up in the ERP or the MRP system and it doesn't render well. Whereas a tablet, a ruggedized tablet, has the right form factor. You can actually access multiple applications, and one of the number one waste in distribution or manufacturing is what is called travel. That is the distance I have to move to do my job. And if I'm going to be working here, but I have to go to a filing cabinet or a binder to get additional information, how many steps is that, and how many times per day am I doing that? That right there could be a huge driving force for change.
And to build off what Chase shared, just some specific examples that come to mind of anticipating change or drivers of change. Today there's a lot of manufacturing environments that have devices that may be powered by Windows CE. So you have an environment that's no longer supported. That ties into another driving factor we see a lot of companies bringing up, but is ensuring that their devices and systems have the enterprise security. Much of the equipment that is deployed in many manufacturing environments was built before there was the concern about hackers and the vulnerabilities of today's networking systems. So that might be a driving factor, or at least it should be something you should think about and anticipate. The other thing I wanted to touch on that I mentioned briefly at the outset, but I think it's critical that as you identify these driving forces, you now need to think about all your workers as information workers. There was a period where people thought of the office worker as the information, and it was a white-collar thing. But in today's environment where people need information and data to do their job better, it's critical, and I think the leading companies are ones that think of all their workers as information workers. Because this digitalization of the factory and manufacturing environments is only going to continue and probably accelerate. You're going to have more and more equipment that's going to be connected, it's going to communicate, whether it's machine to machine or machine to server. You're going to be configuring it remotely, monitoring it remotely. So this future of us all being information workers is obviously a critical driving force. So the next step is now to start analyzing and diving into our business processes and making sure through this you're defining the right level of capability for your mobile solution and mobile devices. So you want to look holistically at your business processes, but Chase kind of touched on this, is really zero in on the ones that can really drive productive change for your environment, and then to drill into the details. Obviously, you need to support the information workers throughout your factory floor and distribution center. And you see some examples that we don't necessarily need to talk to on the bottom of the screen. But it really is critical to think through all of these processes.
So when you're looking at your processes and you're looking to eliminate, waste, in Lean Six Sigma, there's two different types of definition. One, there is a value-added step and a non-value-added step in every process. Value-added is defined as anything the customer is willing to pay for. Non-value-added may be the nature of your business, but it's not driving any value to the customer. So when you're looking at these, it's really important to try to define, one, how does your customer define value? Two, compare every step within a process against how that customer defines value and determine which ones are value-added and non-value-added. Then you take a look at the non-value-added steps. How can I potentially eliminate that non-value-added step? Or if that non-value-added step is something like waiting, in other words, you're going into a manufacturing process and you've got work cells where one work cell does one step, the next work cell does the next, so forth and so on. Is there a work cell that is idle and not working because it's waiting on the previous work cell? That waiting time is considered non-value added. It is something the customer does not want to pay for. How can I reduce that waiting step? So you may not be able to eliminate a non-value added step, but can you reduce its impact on the operation? And this goes back to not only the total cost of ownership within the mobile device and the technology, but it also can help drive down the cost of your goods that you are manufacturing, which eventually will drive to the bottom line in profitability.
So as you then identify those requirements, your needs, the next step is to start thinking about identifying what is the right best-in-class mobility solution that meets those requirements. Now, we all know in life plenty of examples of using the wrong tool. There's probably plenty of us at home that at times have had a stuck bolt and we've grabbed an adjustable crescent wrench and ended up just rounding off the bolt head, or it popping loose and we scrape some knuckles. So now as you approach this thinking of mobility and the list of requirements, you got to make sure you have the scalability, the flexibility, the performance, but again, you need to think of how can I best future-proof, anticipate some of the requirements that may come down the road, and apply that to the requirements for your mobility device. We know in factories today, obviously, every tool is matched to the task, and that goes whether it's an RFID reader, a barcode scanner, or a mobile tablet. All your tools must be optimized for your manufacturing floor and environment. Another thing that I think is important is make sure you have the connectivity and I/O that matches your needs. This is a thing we've seen many companies stumble on. Manufacturing environments are going to have a lot of old equipment. An obvious example, there's a lot of equipment out there that still is interfaced through serial. But if you look at today's consumer devices, there haven't been serial ports in I don't know how many years. But there are mobile solutions that can provide that interface to serial or other specific industrial networks that you may need. And again, this is something that is very critical in the manufacturing environment that you don't see in the kind of standard business environment.
So as John was saying, it's really important for your solution provider to, again, I go back to asking why. Why are you looking for a mobility solution? And make sure they really understand your requirements to make sure that they're coming in with a solution and a recommendation for you. Because it's really important that from that perspective, to get a really good total cost of ownership is to make sure that that device will be able to enhance the worker, enhance the process, not just today, but in the future. And so this is where we come at and want you to look for, get into and understand not just your current state, but understand what is called future state. Where do you see the business evolving? Where are you going? And so that way, as you're looking at mobility technology, you're looking at the right fit, again, not just for today, but into the future, which if you take that approach, then it's not down to how much is that device costing me now. It is, can I use that same device into the future, which brings the total cost of ownership and drives it down dramatically. And again, we're trying to make sure that we're fitting the right piece of technology for the right step in the process to increase efficiency and productivity of the process and the workforce.
And that leads right into a point that I think it's critical to look at, but is the processor that is going to be in your mobile devices. Obviously, it needs to handle today's information and application load, but you have to, again, anticipate the next generation of software. And this is something that we all know Intel has been around a long time and powered the world's PCs, but something they have really developed a lot of strength in is the devices for mobile work. They've brought the power and performance that we're used to with Intel processing. They've built the security in today's enterprises, but they've also made these processors very stingy in their use of battery power, helping ensure the performance and battery life that's needed in a field or manufacturing environment. So as you're evaluating solutions, there's devices out there that won't talk about what processor they use. And if not, I encourage you, ask the vendor, make sure you understand what processor, and you have the confidence that processor will support you for the long term. So our next step now is to start testing and evaluating some potential solutions, and to do that with the users. And Chase, I know you've had a lot of experience in this regard, so I'll let you discuss that.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff I've been talking about to this point is part of lean manufacturing. But as was stated earlier, I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, and most people don't necessarily think that Lean and Six Sigma go together, but they actually do. Lean is all about removing waste in the process. Six Sigma is all about measuring. So what I mean by that is you can whiteboard the process, you can investigate the right mobility technology, you've got input from the users on the floor, and then you roll it out. What I have seen too many times is it doesn't work on the whiteboard in the conference room quite the way you anticipated. So it's really important to evaluate the solution with the users themselves in basically what is called a conference room pilot. In a smaller subset of your manufacturing process, make sure that it has the impact that you anticipated. If you have to go back to the drawing board or look at a part of the process or the technology to modify or tweak it, do so before you go and roll it out across the entire facility or the entire manufacturing line. This way, a couple of things. You minimize the impact if it doesn't work correctly or as you wanted it to. Secondly, you're getting buy-in from the people on the floor, because no one knows their job better than the person on the floor who's doing it.
And I think it's important as you do these pilots, which I completely agree in, that you also think of a step where you do some trials in the field or in the actual environment. We've seen customers that will do the conference room pilot, they'll have a mobile device, and they'll ensure the software works, and they'll bring some users in. But sometimes the way a user works when it's sitting in a conference room and there's lots of people watching him or her can be quite different than how they'll actually use it when they're out on their daily routine. You also can realize there might be environmental things you didn't realize, just how often the device might get dropped and onto what kind of floor, what kind of dust and temperature or humidity might you be facing. And these are things that we've seen that have hung up a lot of projects in a lot of companies, especially when they've thought about, well, let's just try some consumer mobile devices, which again might work great in one environment, an office environment, but put out in the real world of a manufacturing floor don't always hold up. So let's move to the next step. And while we say this is step 5, I could actually probably make a pretty strong argument that engaging experts is something you want to look at doing right from the very beginning. We touched on this earlier. You need the confidence that you have a mobile solution provider that is a trusted advisor, as Chase mentioned earlier, and that is really helping you solve your greatest business challenges. And this is really critical because there's a lot of new technology coming, a lot of new terms, whether it's industrial Internet of Things, augmented reality, big data, many new digital platforms. And sometimes vendors will try to influence and, throw out all these acronyms and terms as though they are the expert. So Chase, this is something you personally and Barcoding's been doing a lot. How about you talk a little bit more about that input that the solution provider expertise can bring?
Sure. I mean, the one thing, kind of like John was stating, I would not get caught up in the latest, greatest buzzwords and this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I mean, I'll take you back, to show my age a little bit here, I'm going to take you back to the Betamax and the VHS recorder. Betamax was actually a superior product, but VHS did a much better job of marketing, so guess which one won? So it's really important that you investigate, you reach out to experts who specialize in what you're trying to do. From a barcoding perspective, one of the things that we always do is we really and truly are an automation and innovation company. So we may have started in the business with barcodes and scanners, that's why our name is Barcoding. But at the same token, we have become a complete end-to-end supply chain provider. And so our approach, and we recommend this of everybody, is when you are looking for a provider, make sure they have, one, your best interest at heart, because you want them to be looking out for you and where you're going. Lean on their expertise, but I'm a firm believer in check and balance. Until you build that relationship as a trusted advisor with that solution provider, anything they're recommending to you, go to some additional industry sources, bounce their ideas off of them, make sure you're making a sound business decision. Because again, the one thing you want to do is you want to make sure that they're recommending the right technology, not just the greatest buzz of the day. And when you're looking at a total solution, John has mentioned this several times, but we've got to make sure you're not necessarily looking for the cheapest. You need to make sure you're looking for the right technology, because if you save $1 on the technology, it may have a $2 to $3 negative impact on the efficiency and productivity of your operation. So just the cheapest is not necessarily the right way to go. So again, look for a long-term partner that you can do business with, that can become that trusted advisor, and make sure they're making the right recommendation for the right reason.
This is Mike. Sorry, did one of you guys jump off?
So at this point,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is John. Chase's point leads perfectly into this next step of really thinking about now the total cost of ownership. So up until now, you've probably been shopping or looking at alternatives based on the performance capabilities and something that meets all the requirements that you've laid out previously. And it's only natural that you're going to kind of calculate the cost based on kind of the list price or the prices provided to purchase or buy the equipment. But it is really critical that when you think about a mobile solution, you realize the costs are much more than just the cost of the devices. Obviously, there's the time involved. Chase gave a good example of just travel time. And as you put a solution together, just improving or reducing the travel time for a worker has a big impact on costs. Also, you might anticipate there's going to be failures. I mean, this is technology, and often consumer devices will see a failure rate obviously much higher in an industrial setting than than rugged purpose-built devices. But you also have to think about if a device fails, the downtime of the worker or the equipment. For example, if you have a rugged tablet mounted on a forklift and that rugged tablet goes down or breaks, is that forklift now out of commission, and what's the cost of that? The software and just the upkeep. Sometimes you might go to a solution that causes special development of apps to run on your mobile device, and that can be an added cost. There's the cost of errors. So there's many aspects that will factor into the total cost beyond just the price of the devices. And so, that really leads into another important point that's been validated by some industry research as well as many successful manufacturers, is that the total cost of ownership of a mobility solution is overwhelmingly dominated by lost productivity and some of the IT and system costs. And in fact, VDC did an analysis that showed a rugged purpose-built mobile device has a total cost of ownership of half that of a non-rugged consumer device. And we've seen this time and again where you'll have a project that's underway, and then the executive will kind of come in and say, well, wait a minute, I can buy 2 consumer devices for the cost of that, purpose-built rugged solution. Yet they're not anticipating all these costs. So Explorer is pleased. We've got a TCO calculator that we actually make available to our customers and partners, where you can actually enter in the information yourself. You can put what you believe the cost implications are for the devices you're evaluating, the cost of downtime, the cost of the IT support when there are issues. And really, it's about making sure you come up with a solution that meets your needs. So that kind of brings us to the end. And we've talked through a lot of things, looking at many aspects of a successful mobility solution for the manufacturing environment. Chase, I'd like your thoughts of kind of final thoughts before we turn it over to the Q&A.
I'm not sure if Chase might have Dropped off for a sec.
Dropped off. All right.
So,
well,
so the one thing I want to make
yeah.
sure everybody understands is, one, I want to thank you very much for your time today. But more importantly, kind of the common thread that I've been trying to weave out this message that John and I have been delivering is make sure you look at your business in its entirety. And what I mean by that is look at people, look at processes, then and only then look at the right technology. By doing this approach will enhance your ability for success. And then you can make sure that you've got the right technology for today, but also going into the future.
Yeah, and I would echo that completely. And, a thing I like to tell people is you do exactly what Chase mentioned is, to sit back and ask yourself, what does success look like? And I think if you really kind of paint that picture, then you can be confident that you're going to put yourself on the path to a successful mobile solution. So, Mike, I think this brings us to the end, and we will be happy to take some questions.
All right. All right, well, certainly a ton of great input on this topic that our audience at Industrial Distribution and all of our sister manufacturing publications is talking about is just mobile technology, how to get the best value from it, how to maximize it, and obviously the need to get it in place. And I thought you guys brought up some great points, especially just about, the price dictates so much of what we do in our daily lives and especially and business decisions. But technology, it certainly seems like that's a place where you can't just go cheap for cheapness' sake. Like you said, just a difference in a few dollar amount, it can just kind of make or break the difference between the quality of the product you're getting. And sure, you might see that you're saving $1 up front, but yeah, you really got to keep it, taking into factor kind of the long-term costs of the extra services that you could have paid a little more for, and that would have been much more worth your while. So yeah, I thought that was some real good just that content that you guys had there. But like I mentioned in the introduction, that we are not done yet. We are now going to transition into a Q&A session using questions that the audience has been bringing in during John and Chase's presentation. And I want to remind the audience that certainly keep sending in those questions. We'll see how many we can get to within these next 10 minutes or so. So starting off, I'm going to shoot this first question over to John. John, this audience member, it sounds like they're looking for some clarification. They say, I'm confused that you talked about mobile devices mounted on forklifts. They say, aren't they already mobile even with fixed computers mounted on them?
Yeah, that's a good point. And, obviously there's been fixed mobile terminals on forklifts for many years. But I think the definition of mobility is really evolving and changing. And again, it comes looking at your workers, your workflows, and the processes. And we've seen a strong trend where going away from those fixed terminals to a more flexible solution where if you have a tablet and a rugged industrial dock, now if your workflow requires, perhaps the person needs to get out of the forklift, and if they can pop the tablet out and perhaps to do RFID or a barcode scan that they were not able to access obviously directly through the forklift. Again, it has to match your workflows. Another thing is just the downtime for repairs. If a tablet has some fault, or perhaps you're just going to be updating software, if you have a fixed computer on the forklift, you have to take it out of service while you're fixing or updating the software. With mobile tablets, you have that ability to, take one out and pop in another one. So this is a trend that I know some of the industry research firms have really talked about, a significant shift from the fixed forklift terminals to more mobile devices that are industrially mounted. All
right, good stuff. Let's go over to Chase with this next question. Chase, this audience member, you guys kind of brought this up about these process change and just kind of what's involved with the whole process. So this question is kind of open-ended. It just asks, when making a process change, what is the best approach to make sure you have success?
Well, that's a good question, and there's many different approaches. And I'm a firm believer that you have to take a holistic approach to it. And what I mean by that, you've heard me throughout Lean, Six Sigma, there's also Kaizen, there's also Agile. And I'm not a firm believer that you approach every problem with one practice or one approach. It is trying to find that best approach that best fits your organization and your business. And so, just at a very high level, the best thing I can tell you to do is do not bring managers and executives into a room to define, hey, here's the change we're going to make and here's all the detailed steps. As I stated earlier, the people who know the process the best and who knows how things do the best and the problems they run into are the people who actually do the work. Get those people involved and get them involved early. By doing that, what's going to happen is as you roll out the changes or roll out the new processes or bring in the new mobility and technology, they're going to be your champions on the floor. They're going to be the ones that are going to carry the message and say, I was involved in that process. They listened to me. They didn't implement all of my ideas, but the ones they didn't, they told me the business reason why. But they did implement this of mine. This company listens to me. And that is going to drive up your success rate as you roll out new processes and you bring in new mobility technology to enhance those processes.
All right, real good stuff there. Obviously, and yeah, we kind of hear that in all facets of business. It seems like if you go directly to, the executive level, the people that are just kind of overseeing the operation and not being the hands-on people, yeah, I think they're going to be more apt to maybe just decide with what they think is the bottom dollar best decision, as opposed to having the people using it on a day-to-day basis who know the pros and cons of what they're looking for, what they need to avoid. So, yeah, real good stuff there about having the right people involved with that decision process. So let's go back over to John with this next question. And this audience member brings up a good point. I know that cloud computing is getting so much talk these days, and it's only going to keep getting a bigger component of manufacturing operations. So they mentioned you didn't talk about cloud computing, and with it being such a big trend, why not?
Yeah, that's a great question, and obviously cloud computing is another technology that is, impacting industry and manufacturing environments. There's nothing about cloud computing that changes anything of what Chase and I talked about today. In fact, I actually believe the move towards cloud computing is putting more focus on mobility and, empowering your workers with access to the data that they need. What I've seen is many manufacturing environments are really starting to think of where do I need the processing. So you'll hear talk about processing on the edge. How the data can be processed and analyzed, maybe right there at the machine or in your mobile device, or perhaps you have a plant server that can ensure all the machinery is operating. But I've seen companies that leverage the cloud for doing some of their aggregating data, especially across multiple manufacturing sites. So if there's maybe some longer-term analysis and trends they want to do, but the more you need real-time decision-making, the more you need the processing closer to the factory, closer to the device, closer to the user.
All right. Let's go back over to Chase with this next question. You guys kind of mentioned some different software platforms that do provide these mobile technologies. So this audience member, I'm going to try not to absolutely butcher the name, but I think it's Nishantan. It was probably totally wrong, but anyways, they ask any recommendations for software that reduces downtime.
So yeah, this is Chase. I mean, there's lots of different ways to approach this, but usually when we start talking about downtime, we talk about the mobility device itself. The battery is constantly being drained. It's not on your network. It can't connect. The device is not working correctly. Typically, the recommendation here is an MDM solution, which is a mobile device management software package. And there's a lot of advantages around it and what it can do for you. It has analytic capability that it can tell you which devices are constantly draining the battery faster. It can determine who the user is. They can determine from that, is it a software leak? Is it the use? If the operator says, hey, I'm constantly losing connectivity with the wireless network, they can actually, through that MDM software component, can tell whether the device actually is or isn't using it, or losing connection, I should say. So instead of taking the worker's name for it, it can also give you that kind of information. It can also run analytics as to, based on the life of the battery or the life of certain aspects, it can let you know, hey, that battery, because of its current state or where it's at or how the reports or information we have on it, that battery probably needs to be replaced. So that way you can have the information at hand. Another real beauty of an MDM solution is you create a golden image of a device. And the MDM solution can push that image or an update to the individual devices. So in your facility, if you have 10 devices or 110 devices, and let's say that there's a software update you have to push to all 110, through an MDM software, you can push that update to all the devices simultaneously, making sure they're all in sync with each other and make sure that one device is not working on an older version of the software. So an MDM solution would be probably my recommendation to do that.
All right, and Chase, we'll stick with you for our last question for this Q&A because we're coming up against the hour. This is a pretty interesting question here. This audience member says, we recently implemented technology and our productivity is actually decreased. Any thoughts on why that might be?
Well, that probably tells me that you put in the wrong technology for the process, or what you did is you changed the process to fit the technology. It's kind of like what I talked about earlier. The technology needs to enhance or enforce the processes in the worker environment the way you want it to. So if someone has implemented a piece of technology and you had to change your process just because that was the nuance of that technology, then that probably tells me that you chose the wrong technology, unfortunately.
All right, simple enough. All right, well, that's actually, since we're running short on time here, that's going to be the last question we'll get in here for the Q&A, and that's essentially going to wrap up today's webinar with the topic of, I'm losing my place here, the topic of improving industrial maintenance, or I'm sorry, I'm getting all lost here. But in any effect, that concludes today's webinar discussion of avoiding the Industry 4.0 tech trap, how to assemble a future-proof mobile solution for your manufacturing environment. John and Chase, I definitely want to thank you guys for being here today and offering all your insight, and especially those Q&A responses, kind of expanding on the content you already presented. So yeah, and like I said, this topic, it's going to remain a major talking point among our audience, not just for the publications that I oversee at Industrial Distribution and IMPO, but all of our manufacturing publications that expand to the areas of food manufacturing, just a kind of broad-based manufacturing and kind of everything in between. So yeah, as more and more distributors and manufacturers, kind of all these kinds of industrial facilities try to find out how to best implement these mobile technologies, which ones to choose, and yeah, just trying to find out that right mix of what's right for them, what fits their budget, and what it's going to do for them. So before we sign off real quick, starting with John and then to Chase, do you guys have any last words or final thoughts for the audience?
Well, Mike, I want to thank you and Chase, as well as Intel, for supporting this event. I appreciate the input from the users on some questions, and I look forward to many successful mobile solutions helping improve manufacturing.
And I, too, want to thank Mike and John also and Intel for participating in this. And I'm just going to leave you with this, and it's kind of, I'm kind of really amplifying this, but please, please don't implement technology, just implement technology. Look at it for a total solution and make sure you're implementing technology for the right reason, for the right purpose.
All right. Well, I really want to thank our sponsors, Xplore Technologies, Barcoding Inc., and Intel for sponsoring today's event. And I, of course, want to thank everyone in the audience who tuned in. Like I mentioned earlier, this webinar will be made available on demand starting tomorrow. So starting then, you can watch it however many times you want and share it in any manner that you want. So one last thank you to everyone involved, and have a great rest of your day.